there's only two things a nation does that it doesn't let its people do. One, kill you. You can't kill yourself. They can put you to death. And two, make money. Nations, and anyone who's a hardcore, I'm not a hardcore Bitcoin person, but a nation needs to have sovereign money. That's sovereign wealth. And that's very like the charterless concept. You print the money, you give it to them, you take it back a tax, you create that circle, right? And then you skim off the top and you run it. Bitcoin was becoming a threat, whether it's made by someone or not, I don't care. It has a life of its own now. It is a Trojan horse in many ways. And what the US does, not all governments, what the US does is it will, if it catches it early enough, it'll kill it. The threat to the dollar. If it doesn't catch it early enough, it'll just use rhetoric and propaganda and fund it. And if it survives that, then it won't actively attack it. Maybe like a CIA assassin goes out to kill Bitcoin. I mean, you get my point, like a regime change. And then if it can't do that, and this is where the US is really smart, it co-opts it. So when you create the ETFs, I know that people do not value the liquidity network that the US has big enough. And so I'm going to exaggerate, but I'll make a point. 70% of all the Bitcoin transactions were outside of the US. The liquidity was not in the US. You create, finally, the spot Bitcoin ETF, and without doing anything intentional, without funding it, without manipulating it, you make the liquidity pool the US. And so the US may not own the Bitcoin, but the US controls the Bitcoin. You raise margins, you change T2, all these things, and you control the liquidity pool. So if you can't kill it, you demonize it. If you can't demonize, or vice versa, you co-opt it. So what the US does is it takes everything it cannot control. But you can write a paper on this. Everything it cannot control, that's an outside force, and it co-opts it. And that's what we did with Bitcoin. Now, I'm not even into the manipulation part. In 1974, there's a WikiLeaks email out there that essentially says what I'm about to say. In 1974, after the US went off the gold standard and the price of gold started to move higher, the US and the UK, London, were trying to keep the price of gold down. Why? Because they were cheating. They were printing more dollars than they had of the gold. And they had this thing called the London Gold Pool Scheme, et cetera, et cetera. But then they came up with an idea, simple idea. And it's in the email. We're going to create a futures exchange for gold. Why? Because it's in the email. If you can create a futures exchange, then you can reduce the demand for physical. Because over time, people will take convenience over authenticity, right? I'll take the knockoff. And when you get them with electronic bank accounts, it grows more and more. And a generation goes by and your grandparents are dead. And they're like, I don't need the gold. It's the next best thing that's gold. And you do that. And over time, you set up the market structure because you don't want gold to go up. You make it a tier 3 asset. You make the margins higher. And then you have these banks called bullion banks. Those are the custodians of Bitcoin now. The bullion banks say, all right, the government wants gold to go down. They're happy when it goes down. They're lending us money at zero. We'll rehypothecate. And so rehypothecation, which was invented for gold bulls, not for bears, is used by bears to sell 5-10 times as much gold as out there. And the reason it works, Marty, is because the US liquidity pool is so big that the trading, you look at the US price, you trade on the US hours. You don't trade in the off hours. We become the market. And in becoming the market, and the futures price becomes more important than the spot price, the derivative price becomes more important than the spot price, then you can influence the market lower by just selling paper. You don't need the gold. You don't need the gold. Just get the paper. And that goes on for years. And then they come up with other schemes. And I don't mean, these are just traders who want to make money. I would have done it if I was in that seat. It's like, wait a minute. You want it to go down? Fine. I would approach the Fed in 1993, just like the bullion banks did, and said, you guys have gold sitting in Fort Knox doing nothing? Give it to us. We'll give you 50 basis points for it. We'll take the money. We'll take the gold. We'll short it. We'll take the money and we'll go buy something else. Greenspan was like, great idea. It happened. Great idea. Clinton who was the president at the time, was like, great idea. It'll keep the bond players from freaking out, because bond players would buy gold as a substitute. And so they did it successfully for 30 years. And a generation goes by, and like an elephant tied to a stake with a thread, he doesn't know he can pull the stake out of the ground. And it goes on and on. And that's why Bitcoin is gold 2.0. They're doing the same thing. Are they doing it to buy it? Yeah, they're doing it to buy it. Are they doing it to make it the dollar? No, they're not going to do that. Then you lose sovereign money. And little by little, there's no liquidity in the world anywhere for Bitcoin except here now. I mean, and other nations like China, although they should have it, and they probably do have it, they've shied away from it because the US has a monopoly on it now. And so the rehypothecation has gone from bullion banks selling futures and taking the money and borrowing to custodian banks like JP Morgan or BlackRock, or however they do it. Go ahead, I'll have your Bitcoin, I'll give it to you in 5 days. You basically take 5 orders for Bitcoin and you sell. It's rehypothecation all over again. So every time someone buys a Bitcoin at the BlackRock level, they're slamming a future. And you know why that works? It works for the same reason JP Morgan makes money when silver goes up. JP Morgan has all the silver in the world, hypothetically, in their vault. They have the Hunt Brothers silver. It's been passed down to them. But they're not long silver. They're short futures against it. And if the shit hits the fan, they just won't honor the contract. Isn't that what Bitcoin places are doing? That's what they did. We don't have the Bitcoin, so we're not going to honor the contract. So it's happening all over again. And they've got Bitcoin under control, and it'll go up in price, but there's no one who's going to challenge the US on it right now, at least not yet. So I hope that makes sense.